So in this video I will be analysing underrated players, putting them into different categories depending on how underrated they are, and I will be showing clips of them as well as putting their FB ref reports and other stats on the screen as well for you to look at. But for cheap good quality football jerseys, retro jerseys and tracksuits, go over to www.jerseyfifa.com, a link will be left in the description, and use code ATLANTISFOOTBALL for 5% off. Also, if you haven't already, check out my How to Improve Manchester United playlist. I'll leave that linked in the description. It will contain videos such as the video on Antonio Conte at Manchester United, how Oli could improve United's attack and defence without transfers immediately, and my videos on players like Donny van der Beek and Anthony Martial as well. But now let's get into the first category of underrated players, and these players are the players who everyone knows is underrated and everyone continues to call them underrated, so technically they aren't really underrated anymore, but everyone still doesn't really give them the recognition that they probably deserve, but everyone recognises that they do deserve it. And the first player in this category is Domenico Berardi. Berardi did win the Euros with Italy in the summer and turned 27 in August, and he currently plays for Sassuolo. I'd describe him best as a goal-scoring inside forward who's much better at scoring goals himself rather than creating chances for others, and in this sense he reminds me a lot of Lucas Podolski. His goal-scoring record speaks for itself. Last season in 30 Serie A games he scored 17 goals, and the season before in 31 Serie A games he scored 14 goals, which shows that Berardi on average is going to score you a goal every other game, which is absolutely amazing for a wide attacker. Around the box his shooting is lethal, able to use his right or left foot to drill the ball hard and low past the keeper or into the roof of the net, but when he's on the right side he can also cut in and put in those curling shots into the far corner. But despite me saying he's definitely more of a goal scorer than a creator, his creative metrics are still impressive. If we look at his FB ref report over the last 365 days when compared to every other midfielder in Europe's top 5 leagues, we can see that he ranks in the 80th percentile for non-penalty goals, non-penalty XG and non-penalty XG plus XA, and in the 90th percentile for shot creating actions created, progressive passes and interceptions, whilst also ranking in the 60th percentile for expected assists, showing that just from his statistical output, Berardi has to be considered a top level attacker just from his goal scoring and creative metrics. And I think if you put him in a better team, say maybe a Liverpool or even in a Manchester City, I think his goal scoring numbers would go up even further, and we could possibly see him getting around 20 goals plus per season. His contract is up at Sassuolo in 2024, so come the summer he will have just 2 years left on his contract, so I reckon a fee in the region of around £30 million would be enough to force Sassuolo's hand and sell Berardi to whichever team wants him. I think teams like Juventus, Bayern Munich and even Manchester City and even Liverpool as well should be interested in him, because even though he may not be a starter for all of these clubs, it's such a reasonable fee that just adding that squad depth and that ability to come off the bench and provide a goal scoring threat and play certain roles in certain games to increase the side's goal scoring ability from the flanks would make this fee worth it. Now I do have two other players who I think come into this category of players who everyone calls underrated but really everyone rates, and both those players are Raphinha at Leeds and Tchouaméni at Monaco. If you watch my video on how Solskjaer can solve United's defensive central midfield issues, you'll see at the end I do talk about Tchouaméni, analysing him in greater depth, so I won't go into that a lot in this video, but just by looking at his FB ref report you can see how good he is. You can see that when he's compared to every other midfielder in Europe's top 5 leagues over the last 365 days, that for tackles completed he sits in the 98th percentile, and for interceptions he sits in the 93rd percentile, showing that Tchouaméni is amongst the best ball winning central midfielders in the world. But unlike players like say Ndidi or even Claude Makelele back in the day, Tchouaméni is a lot more capable of playing the box-to-box midfielder role if asked to do so. He combines his powerful dribbling ability and his close ball control to be able to be very press resistant in the press, able to turn away from players and drive forward up the pitch, which is especially useful in a possession oriented side when the opposition look to press you aggressively. So if you have a player like Tchouaméni in that deep central midfield role, it can really aid your ball progression. He's only 21 years old, so he will develop quickly, so I think the big clubs in Europe should be sniffing around him. I think the main three who should be pursuing Tchouaméni are Manchester United, Manchester City and Real Madrid, as I think he's good enough to start for all those sides, and certainly for a side like Manchester City, they do need an industrious player to sometimes play alongside Rodri, and Tchouaméni definitely is able to do this. Raphinha, like Tchouaméni, is also an elite player already, and like the Monaco man, I think Raphinha could play for any club in the world. He reminds me a lot of Angel Di Maria or Hakim Ziyech, having that ability to cut inside on his left foot and either create with an in-swinging cross into the box or a sharp pass in behind the back line. He's also quite similar to a player like Mahrez, as he has that one-on-one dribbling ability, able to isolate a player in the flanks and go past him, which is increasingly valuable in the modern game, especially when sides look to transition their attack quickly, and Raphinha is a perfect player to do this, so coming into a counter-attacking system, Raphinha is going to be an excellent addition. His FB ref report supports my argument about him being an elite player. He ranks in the 90th percentile for expected assists, the 80th percentile for non-penalty XG and expected assists combined, shot creating actions and progressive passes. So like Tchouaméni, I do think the big clubs should be interested in Raphinha. Tchouaméni would likely cost between 30 and 40 million pounds. Raphinha will probably cost between 45 and maybe 55 million pounds, so he is a bit more expensive. He's also 25, but I do think he is a player who's going to be coming into his prime in the next few years. So I think teams like Manchester United, Manchester City, Real Madrid, pretty much any club in the world should be looking at Raphinha, but really any side who needs a right winger who can cut inside on his left foot and provide a creative outlet should be looking at Raphinha, because in terms of value for money, I think he's one of the best in the world at the moment, particularly when you consider the likes of Jadon Sancho are going for 70 million pounds plus. To be able to get a player like Raphinha in his prime for around 50 million is an excellent signing. My next category are players who are well regarded by English football fans, but for whatever reason aren't considered top level players. And the three I've chosen are all Chelsea players. The first two are Rudiger and Christensen, who I think over the past year have improved significantly. I do think Rudiger is now one of the best centre-backs in world football. He's fantastic in one-on-one defending situations, excellent in the tackle, an aggressive tackler, he reads the game well, can step out of the back line. He's a progressive passer, with his long and incisive passing abilities being very good, enabling Chelsea to progress the ball forward, which is exactly what you look for in a top-level centre-back. But most crucially, defensively, he's absolutely solid now. He can play in a high back line due to his pace and one-on-one defending ability, and Christensen next to him has got even better as well. I don't think Christensen is as good as Rudiger, and I would like to see him in a different system, maybe in a 2 centre-back system, to see how good he actually is, as I do think he benefits a lot from Tuchel's 3-4-3 defensive shape, particularly how compact it is. But Christensen is another good ball-playing centre-back. Both of these centre-backs are out of contract at the end of the season, so if Chelsea don't renew their contracts, I definitely think that any club in the world should be looking at Rudiger, and Christensen could do a job for a lot of sides as well, particularly if they play that 3 at the back system and need a ball playing centre back inserted into the back 3. The third Chelsea player I would put in this category is a player who hasn't performed to the heights we know he can at Chelsea, but I still consider him to be an elite player, and that's Hakim Ziyech, who at Ajax was arguably one of the best players in Europe at the time, particularly in their run to the Champions League semi-final in 2018-2019. He was definitely one of the best players in Europe, and consistently his metrics showed how good he was. In his last season in the Eredivisie, he was the only player to record a who scored rating above an 8 over the course of the whole season, whilst also recording 4.3 key passes per 90, the most in the league, and you can see how impressive this is if you compare it to someone like Donny van de Beek, who finished in 30th in the key pass ranking with just 1.9, showing how good a creator Hakim Ziyech was. But the reason we haven't seen him tear up the Premier League just yet is because he's been in and out of the Chelsea side, both with Lampard and Tuchel. They have so many options in those positions that I think it's been hard for him to nail down a consistent starting position. But if Tuchel were to give him a run of say 5 to 8 games, I think we would see the best of Ziyech, and I still think he's Chelsea's best advanced creator. I do think he's a level above the likes of Pulisic, Havertz and Mount in terms of chance creation, and when we look at his FB Ref report we can see this. So over the last 365 days he actually sits in the 94th percentile for shot creating actions when compared to every other midfielder in Europe's top 5 leagues, and he sits in the 80s for expected assists and progressive passes, showing that Hakim Ziyech's output over the last 365 days has still been to a top level. If he doesn't manage to cement himself in Tuchel's starting 11 come the summer, he could be one of the bargains of the transfer window. Chelsea signed him for around £40 million, and I think you could still pick him up for that amount as well, as he has aged slightly and he hasn't really impressed that much at Chelsea, so I think his value is still around that £40 million mark. So teams like Arsenal, Tottenham, even the likes of Juventus and Bayern Munich should be looking at Ziyech as a player to bring in, and he is a player in the mould of a young Angel Di Maria or Raphinha, who I did mention earlier on in this list, so I think he can be a player that comes into a top level side and impresses like he did at Ajax. So I went over about 6 players there. I may do another video looking at some other underrated players. Give me some suggestions in the comments, and also give me some other video suggestions that I can do. I will be releasing videos shortly on Zinedine Zidane at Manchester United, Erik ten Hag, and some other Manchester United analysis videos, as well as some match analysis from the weekend's games coming up. So let me know what you want to see, and also go to the description to check out some of my other videos as well, and follow me on Twitter and Instagram for more content as well.